Welcome, adventurers. Today, I am beginning a deep dive, well, actually a really shallow and impressionistic dive into all of the classes in the Pathfinder 2e system, starting at the top and where it all began, at least for me, with the Alchemist. Welcome to Rebel, Then King, a new channel dedicated to the Pathfinder 2nd Edition system. I hope to give you some insights into the mechanics of the game, but more importantly, talk about how those core mechanics translate into actual gameplay experiences. And yes, my first gameplay experience was playing as an alchemist. Little did I know that would turn out to be a controversial and, according to some, poor decision. But before we get into that, let's take a look at the core mechanics of the class. An alchemist is an intelligence-based class. It is trained in simple weapons as well as alchemical bombs. It has light and medium armor proficiency and 8 hit points per level. An alchemist is trained in a number of skills equal to 3 plus its intelligence modifier. So you can see it's sort of a medium-light martial build. There are 4 subclasses, which are called research fields. There's the bomber, the mutagenist, the toxicologist, and the chirurgeon. Or is it chirurgeon, or chirurgeon, or chirurgeon? I think it's called chirurgeon. That's what research seems to indicate to me is the way we pronounce it in American English, so that's what I'm gonna say. Like, don't hate me for it. Thanks. So let's start off with the good things about the Alchemist. What drew me to the class? Well, first of all, it is very flavorful and unique. You are not a true martial character dealing strictly physical damage to your enemies, but you're also not a caster because alchemy is simply not magic in the 2nd edition system. You're dealing elemental damage still, you're buffing yourself and allies, you're debuffing enemies, but you're doing so with your smarts. As I started playing the Alchemist, one thing that was immediately apparent is how versatile the class is. And this is something that most people can agree on, even if they aren't really fans of the class. Alchemists work by learning alchemical formulas, which they store in their formula book, and by using infused reagents, which are basically raw ingredients. These reagents can be used to create bombs, poisons, mutagens, and elixirs. An alchemist can make any item in their formula book using those reagents, and they begin with 8 formulas. At the start of an adventuring day, an alchemist can take 1 batch of infused reagents and turn it into 2 alchemical items using a feat called Advanced Alchemy. For further flexibility throughout the day, they can always use Quick Alchemy, which lets you take 1 infused reagent to make 1 alchemical item. Now, at first level, this is about the same amount of versatility as you might see with most casters, but as you level up, that does change. You see, it is much easier to learn formulas than it is to learn spells, and by level 3 or 4, you might have 25 to 30 total formulas in your formula book. And remember, you can craft anything in your formula book at any time. So imagine being a sorcerer who has 20 cantrips at their disposal. No caster is capable of that, which arguably makes the Alchemist the most adaptable class in the game. Okay, so that sounds amazing, right? So why is the Alchemist so often on the list of worst classes? Why am I literally the only player in any of my campaigns, or even in campaigns that I've listened to play as an alchemist? I think in part because they are complicated, they are unique, and that is a bad combination. Although each class in the system is unique, there are a lot of shared learnings across other classes. For example, playing as one caster prepares you pretty well for playing as another. The difference between most martial classes tends to be their kind of one special action, like the Barbarian Rage or the Inventor's Overdrive. The difference with alchemists is everything. I think another issue that people have with the Alchemist is that due to it being intelligence-based and having no additional bonuses to attacks or damage, you really do need to work harder than other players in order to keep up with damage output in encounters. Getting the most out of an Alchemist is really, really tough, as you really need to know the system. You need to know how buffs and debuffs work, as well as weaknesses and resistances, and all of that you need to know on top of the complicated core Alchemist mechanics. As a bomber, you'll often be attacking through cover, and you won't be able to get into flanking positions, so you'll never really get an attack bonus. As a toxicologist, well, in my opinion, poisons work a lot better for monsters than they do for PCs. I'll have a video on that later. As a mutagenist, well, almost all of your buffing mutagens come with a pretty severe debuff, which sometimes makes them hard to justify using. And then finally, as the chirurgeon, well, you just have no combat bonuses whatsoever. And honestly, that story did play out for me from time to time. I still remember an encounter against a swarm, and I thought, I'm the Alchemist. I know swarms are weak to splash damage. I'm going to shine in this encounter. And sure, I hit it with an alchemical bomb, and sure, I activated that weakness, but I still didn't do all that much damage. And then a few turns later, the barbarian went in, and despite that swarm being resistant to the barbarian's damage, the barbarian hit so hard, I think with a crit probably, that the swarm just disintegrated. Okay, now we're really ragging on alchemists because alchemists are tied to alchemical items, sort of obviously. And thankfully, many good ones have been added over the years, but a lot of them really aren't that great. I spoke earlier about mutagens, where the debuffs that come along with a lot of them make them really hard to justify, and the bonuses provided by some elixirs are arguably not worth the cost of your precious infused reagents. In my campaign, my teammates outright refused to take mutagens I prepared for them because the benefits they offered either weren't worth the actions in combat or they weren't worth the penalties or debuffs that they imposed. And sort of the last part about the Alchemists that did bum me out, and probably bum me out the most, is that an Alchemist without reagents and without any alchemical items is basically just reduced to being an NPC. You have no bonuses to attack, no bonuses to damage, you no longer are applying buffs or debuffs. I mean, you kind of sit in the back and recall knowledge and make very ineffective melee strikes. And let me tell you, nothing feels worse than using one of your last few remaining precious items and missing. I mean, I literally would hold my breath while rolling dice because I was thinking, gosh, I hope this works, because if it doesn't, I'm just going to be standing waving a dagger around like an idiot. It was tense and stressful, and maybe when you're playing a game, that's not what you're after. Okay, wow, sorry, that got dark. I promise it's not all bad news as the Alchemist. There are great moments to be had. I still remember one encounter against a group of lower level enemies. Seeing that big squishy group target, I decided to throw an Alchemist Fire into the middle. I landed a hit, I did damage to that primary target into all targets around. I think it was 5 or 6 total creatures. Then my GM told me, by the way, they have a weakness to fire. So I activated that weakness and every single creature and did about 50 or 60 points of damage in that one strike. It felt fantastic. Another really positive way to look at the Alchemist is to literally quantify how much you're crafting for free every day. A level 1 Alchemist is typically crafting level 1 items that cost about 3 gold pieces. And that Alchemist is going to make, 8 to 10 of those a day. That's 24 to 30 gold pieces of goods on a daily basis. No other class can claim that. Think of Alchemists as like a little roaming, auto-replenishing loot box, because that's kind of what they are, and it's a fantastic thing to have in your party. So, in conclusion, what do I think of the Alchemist? It's fine. I'm curious to know what you think. Has anybody else played as an Alchemist? What was your experience like? Do you have any recommendations? Would I play as an Alchemist again? I think, yeah. I think it could be fun. As a bomber, I would say concentrate on debuffs and not on damage output. You just won't be able to keep up strictly in damage. But if you can, let's say, flatfoot those enemies using a bottle lightning, well, you are going to buff your party so much, and it'll really work out well in the end. As a toxicologist, I think it would be super fun to make a bunch of poisons, buy a bunch of daggers and throwing knives, poison them all, and just walk into combat with knives, daggers stuffed in your boots, in your pockets, and just start whipping them around the battlefield. Get that poison damage in early, let that persistent damage boil away on the enemies, and just watch them drop before you even have to get close. As a mutagenist, I would definitely pick an ancestry that has a nice unarmed like claws or jaws attack, allowing you to maybe hold 2 different mutagens as you enter combat and take the most appropriate of the 2, drop the other, and then get to work. And then as the Chirurgeon, well, just lean into healing. It's what you do. I would recommend a house rule that my party ended up using, which is introducing a level 3 Elixir of Life that does 2d6 plus 3 healing. The reason for that is that the Elixir of Life, which is the primary means of healing for an alchemist, has a level 1 version and a level 5 version, which means that level 3 and 4, you are using your reagents to do a piddly 1d6 of healing. So make that level 3 version that does 2d6 plus 3, and it'll work out a lot better. So that's it. Let me know what you think. In summary, is an alchemist a martial? No. Is it a caster? No. Is it great? No. Is it bad? No. It's just an alchemist.